We are in the process of looking at chapter 6, and we have been, in looking at chapter 6, we're studying the idea of the context of our clan, which has to do with really us understanding and restoring and being reconciled back to God's original plan and intent for our lives as we pursue the purpose of God for our lives. And so chapter 6 is designed to actually focus on the priorities and the hierarchy of the relationships that will allow us to complete and fulfill God's purpose for our life. And so as we have been studying, we know that Jesus, in Luke chapter 14, verse 25, in his call to discipleship, he commands and demands that we consider by sitting down, counting the cost, and then aligning our lives according to the priorities of discipleship. And so Jesus makes this proclamation. He says, "If any man shall come after me, let him then deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." And then he goes on to say, if a man hates not his father, his mother, his brothers, his sisters, and yea, even his own life, he cannot actually be my disciple. Okay? And so, chapter 6 has to do with us resetting and refocusing and making sure that we bring our lives back in alignment with that order in which Jesus talks about in this context. And so last couple of classes we've been looking at that first priority, and that is the relationship, our single most important relationship that we have with God. And we've been examining that in detail, and we're going to continue our discussion tonight in that regard. And last Sunday, we left off talking about understanding the difference between belief and trust in our single most important relationship. Because what we're examining is, we want to make sure that we all understand when we talk about having a single most important relationship with God, what does that really mean? What does that really entail? Okay? Because it is God's desire that each one of us actually have that kind of relationship with Him. And I want to remind us as we begin our study tonight that we don't forget that when it comes to our lives, each one of us represents the highest expression of God's love, you and me. And His desire is to be in relationship with us. And we serve the type of God, though, that we see illustrated in Jesus' life as He went to the cross. That God has stopped at no measure in trying to show us how much that He desires to have that kind of relationship with us. And so, what we want to do now is begin to learn more about God Himself. Learn more about ourselves. And any hindrances that may be there that prevent us from actually having the type of relationship that God has purposed from before the foundation of the world. And so tonight's class, we want to kind of put in a theme. Actually, this class is Sunday. We're going to be journey. We're going to take a journey from belief to trust. We're going to be going from belief to trust. And what we're going to see, I think, is there may be a gap that may presently exist in our relationship and walk with God, to where we believe God, but we may not fully trust Him. we ended our class by telling the story of the stuntman in the 1800s. Y'all remember that story? Stuntman in the 1800s did this stunt where he would actually stretch a rope across the gorge of Niagara Falls, and he would do this trick, and he would come out and do various variations. And when he would do that, crowds would gather. And this one time he proceeded with the stunt, and he took a wheelbarrow on the tightrope from one side to the next. And when he did that, the crowd went ecstatic. And as they were yelling his praises and accolades, he raised a question to him. And the question was, do you believe I could go back to the other side? And he said, and everybody said, yeah, we believe you can. Matter of fact, we know you can because we saw you just come across it. And then his next response to the crowd was, who's going to get in the wheelbarrow with me as I go back? And the point there is, it's one thing to believe that he can, but it's another thing to trust that he will. And so as we begin our discussion tonight, I want to raise a question to each one of us in our thinking as we drill down on this idea. It's one thing to believe that God can, but it's another thing to trust that he will. And that's a whole different level in terms of walk with our relationship with God. So that's kind of where we're going to begin. We want to further discuss, what does having a single most important relationship with God look like? I mean, in real life, what does that look like? So we also mentioned, on Sunday, we talked about Sister Michelle Wall, who's currently going through a real crisis in her life. And I read to our class her Facebook post as she began the journey of her healing and the rest of her life. And I spoke with Michelle to ask her if she would be willing to do what we did a couple of months ago, is to come and share, participate with us in our class as it relates to this subject in terms of what it means to have a single most important relationship with God. Because as we mentioned, there's a difference between having a belief in God and then trusting God. And you really won't know if you trust Him until you trust Him. I'm going to say that again. You won't know if you trust Him until you trust Him. That's right. Until you get in the wheelbarrow and go across the tightrope with Him, all you have is, at that point, is just belief. But there will come a point in time, and we're going to talk about this on Sunday, where God will require of each one of us a moment in time in our life where we, not just one moment, but there will be a defining moment that you can count on. There will be a demand placed on your life where you gotta trust, and that's par for the Christian. That's par for the Christian walk. So, hello. I'm getting Michelle on the line right now. I got with Michelle, and I asked her to be prepared to answer these three questions. The first question is, expound on your statement that you made in your post. I had all of my entire life to prepare me for this time. I had all of my entire life to prepare me for this time. And then the second question she's going to answer for us, I asked her to expound on this statement that she made. This path has already been laid for me, the path that she's about to undergo. Okay? And then the third question that she was to answer was, there will be certain things I
I will miss out on, but there will be other options for my new body. Sister Michelle, would you go ahead and begin to speak to question number 1, please?
Can you repeat question number 1?
Expound in your statement that you made that said, I had my entire life to prepare for this. I had my entire, what did you mean by that?
So for myself and my family, cancer has been something that we've always had to face. So I think my earliest memory of it was when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and my grandfather taught me how to change my grandmother's subclavian where her port was, and how to clean it with iodine, how to do all those types of things. But also twofold with that is I grew up in a very spiritual family, and so God was always there, always the center, always the presence. He has always been what our family turns to regardless of what is going on. And we've always had to battle cancer. Like, nobody else gets sick with anything else. It's always cancer that is just one of the things that we have to fight through. And so at a young age, my mom, my grandmother, as well as my grandfather had a conversation with me about different preventative things, the mindset to have, how to lean on God, what type of people you want around you when you go through those different things. So I was well prepared once I found the lump in my breast.
Okay, so your family system, you came from a family system where cancer was prevalent in your family system. So in your statement, now that you have been kind of confronted with this particular reality, you're saying being prepared your whole life. I heard you speak of 2 things. One of the things was that your family, how far back did it go?
Well, I first knew about cancer in my family system when I was 3. But my grandmother's sister, her name was Ophelia, she died of breast cancer when she was 42, which was before I was even born. So it's always been there. And it's on both of my maternal grandparents' sides.
Okay, so your normal life circumstances, and in this case, it has to do with this illness of cancer. Because of the predominance of it, that began to prepare you even as a child for this moment. That's kind of what you meant by that statement. Is that correct?
Yes.
But then you also mentioned something else. You mentioned that your spiritual family. So how did that come into play to help prepare you for this moment?
Well, I know a lot of people don't know like the Wall background history, but my family is Native American. Cherokee is a big part of our culture, and so being raised in a family system that has multi-cultures and multi-spiritual elements, we've always been very tied to our spiritual walk and how we live our lives and what we depend on and what we're giving to. So that was a huge element that I grew up in. My grandfather was also baptized in the Church of Christ. He later became a deacon. And so before I even, became a member at ministry, church and God and your spiritual walk was applicable. It wasn't just about us reading the Bible and going to church. It was about how do you live this in your current day-to-day life.
All right. So your clan, your family system also had a spiritual component to it as you grew up, and now you're able to actually connect the dots between what is currently happening in your life now and how God has actually previously God previously have been preparing you all along for what you're having to go through right now. Is that what?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
it's interesting to note, that what we're talking about is the context of your claim as it relates to our discovering our purpose that God has for our life. And I'm hoping that one of the takeaways is that the chapter says you're not a genetic mistake. Everything about you and all your life circumstances is playing a part of what God's purpose and calling for your life is. Thank you. And then the second question was, expound on the statement that you made, this path has already been laid for me. What did you mean by that?
I'm a firm believer in what is for me, and what is going to happen is going to happen. It's my job to be able to adapt to it and be able to handle it in a healthy manner that boosts my mental, my emotional, my spiritual, and my physical health. So when I say the path has already been laid before me, I've already done my prep work. I was already doing everything that I could possibly do as far as my health, as far as my mental health, as far as my spiritual health, before I even got diagnosed with cancer. And because of that, I was the one that found my cancer, and I found it super early. So I'm one of the only people in my family system that ever found their cancer before with stage 4. Typically, everybody finds it at like the latter stage of 3 or 4, and mine was actually at stage 2 when I found it, and then 2B when they actually biopsied it. So there was some time in between that. But also, I just believe that God has already written my life. He already, has put before me a path that I'm supposed to walk. Of course, I have free will in what I do, but I want to follow His path and not my own path.
Wow. So therefore, part of your statement I didn't write in this question, but you mentioned, as weird as it may sound, I'm at peace. So is that the thing that actually brings about the peace that you're talking about? Being able to have this moment?
Exactly, because I know He's already handled everything. In my mindset, I'm not necessarily a morbid person, but if on that operating table, if I had even passed away, I would have known that was still what God had laid before me, and there was still something within my journey and my story that would be able to help other people, my example or my anything. So my worries that have come up throughout this process have been more so, okay, is this going to hurt? Or how do I manage my nervousness? Or it's never been like a doubt that God doesn't have my back.
And you were willing, so you not only believed that God had a course set for you, but I just heard you mention something else. You went beyond belief to actually a trust that even if you went to the operating table and things didn't, and you passed in that process, you had a trust in God that was part of His purpose and plan. And you're willing to trust Him through that. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay. And so you were willing to accept that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next question has to do with this. Expound a little bit, would you please? When you make the statement, there will be certain things I will miss out on, but there will be other options for my new body. Would you actually expound on, if you feel comfortable with, what are the things that you were speaking in regards to having to miss out on?
I think so. Anybody that has been close to me as I've grown up, they've always known that I had a vision to be a wife and to get married, and I wanted to have 4 kids and wanted to be able to breastfeed and do certain things. Well, with me getting cancer, some of those options are no longer viable. So going forward from the cancer forward, I'm no longer going to have the ability to naturally breastfeed. I may not be able to have kids because my type of cancer is hormone receptive, and I will have to go on hormone blockers for 5 to 10 years, which could possibly take me out of my window of fertility. Even if I do decide to like harvest my eggs or things like that, you know, there's just certain things that are not guaranteed. And so probably I would say those things have been the hardest struggles that I've had to deal with, because you have to go back and ask yourself like different choices that I made, different people that I chose to date, different things that I chose to do that I do it the correct way, and then I have to remind myself that I did do it the correct way because this is the way God intended it to be.
Wow. Then the second part of that question is, what new options are you envisioning now with your new body that you made reference to?
So one of the options is, and I researched this the day that I confirmed my surgery date. So one of the things is, if I am able to have a child, I'm going to do assimilated breastfeeding, which means that I can't provide the milk for my child, but I can carry the milk in a bottle-like structure and attach it to myself to where my child will still be able to bond with me and breastfeed as though it was coming from me. Other options that I have to look into, I have a very, very close friend of mine who she has volunteered that if I am not able to have kids, she is willing to be my surrogate for me. So it's a lot of things that I have to pre-plan to be prepared for. But even if God tells me that I'm going to be a childless person, I'm going to be okay with that. Because as many of y'all know, I have like 14 godchildren. So I already have babies. It's just a difference when you want to have your own child.
Lord have mercy. Even if. How many of us can deal with the even ifs? All right. Let's give Sister Michelle Wall another applause. Now what I want to do is just kind of open up. I mentioned to Michelle that we would do this. Open up to anyone who have any questions in the class about her journey. Sister Evans over here.
Hi, Michelle. Sister Evans. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
First of all, I'm very proud of you for sharing your story and being very open and transparent with your story. The question I had was, where was the crossroad of like the stages of maybe unacceptance, anger, and peace? Where did you have that? Where did that connect in your life? Because I'm sure there was some, I know you said that, I appreciate how you laid it out to say that you knew that this was a part of what could happen, but being human, when other, emotions come, where did you come to the clear piece of, okay, I'm truly ready?
What I would say is, a lot of people don't know this about me. I'm a very introspective, introverted person, so I tend to be a planner. When I know something is on the horizon, whether it's decades away or whatever, I've already prepared my mind for what may be, and I've made peace with that. It's not that I want it to happen, I just made peace with it. Based off of what you're asking me, I guess the only thing that I can kind of think of is when I had to just be like, now is my time to deal with this, because I wasn't expecting it's 10 years earlier than when I was expecting it to happen, because most people in my family get diagnosed in their mid to late 40s, and I'm in my mid 30s. So that was the hardest thing that I had to come to grips with, and I had to keep reminding myself that I'm built for this. I'm a child of God. I know this is not going to give me more than I can handle. I've already seen what works and what doesn't work for my family as well as for myself.
Lord have mercy. Anybody else? Any other questions for Michelle? Let's give her another love deposit, guys. Sister Wall, you have been you're a greater blessing than you can ever quantify, or you're a greater blessing that can ever be measured in terms of the impact of your testimony right now, in terms of the life that you're actually living out. And I just suspect, and this is my faith, and if there's one or two in the room who might want to join me in agreement with this, I'm going to actually state publicly, I believe God is going to honor your faith in such a way that that child that you're purposing, you're going to have that child. God's going to honor that. Now somebody said, Brother Jackson, now how can you say what God's going to do? Because of what God said he will do. See, now listen, y'all, I know I done left some of y'all, but that's my faith. That's my faith. My faith is not just a random faith that comes with no basis. It's based on what God says himself about himself. He says this in Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 6. For without faith it is what? Impossible to do what? Please him. But he that cometh to God must do what? But not only believe, but believe what? That he is a what? He is a rewarder of them who diligently seek. I serve a God who is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And there is biblical proof, and this is what we're going to look at Sunday. Going from belief to trust. There is, you can't find in the Bible a biblical example where a person has put their trust, she's trusted in him, and God did not reward that trust. I said God did not reward that trust. It just, and so, as I mentioned to us on the front side of the class, each one of us in our own different walk will have a day and time where you and I will have to, our faith, a nexus will come that will try your faith to determine whether or not you just believe or you trust.